Reanimal begins and ends with a sacrifice. A knife, a body, a well, and one final glimpse of the distant sky above before everything goes dark. This is the most important moment of the entire game, the catalyst for everything that follows, but is also one of the most perplexing. It is evidently a betrayal, 4 children turning against one of their own, yet it seems to be carried out reluctantly, not driven by malice. It is simultaneously a shedding of innocent blood, yet also the means by which new life is brought forth. So why did they do it? And why did it have such a profound effect on their world? The short answer is that we simply don't know, and barring any major revelations in the expanded world chapters to come, we may never know for sure. In true Tarsier fashion, the story is told in such a way that it can support many interpretations, and I think that's a good thing to keep in mind when engaging with any theories. Reanimal is not a mystery to be solved so much as an enigma to be explored. That being said, the game is littered with many clues that point us in a general direction, and in this video I'll be attempting to follow that trail and answer these questions as best I can, presenting one possible explanation that is consistent not only with Reanimal's visible secrets, but with its overt symbolism and clear biblical associations as well. But first things first. In order to understand the sacrifice, we must come to understand the ones who performed it. The world of Reanimal is, above all else, a world at war, and while this great conflict is rendered with such scale and spectacle as to be nearly mesmerizing, it is only a backdrop. The story being told against it is far smaller, and isn't really about war itself so much as it is the trauma of children living in a world destroyed by it. Who is the enemy? Why is the war being fought? It doesn't matter. They don't know and they don't care, they just want to be free of it. Throughout the game, we meet 5 different children, known only as the girl, the boy, Hood, Bucket, and Bandage, and while their characterization is quite minimal, with lines of dialogue that are few and far between, we do learn one key piece of information that helps us understand their motives. All 5 children are orphans, and all 5 attended the orphanage seen in chapters 4 and 5. During the black and white flashback sequence at the end of the game, we can just barely make out a picture on the back wall that matches one found up in the clock tower, depicting a tall man wearing a suit, and according to the official art book, this is none other than the orphanage principal. Admittedly, only 4 of the children appear in this scene. The girl is notably absent, but considering that she is the boy's older sister, and that she appears in another piece of concept art within this very room, I think it is safe to assume that she attended the orphanage as well. This austere place served as a temporary home for those with nowhere else to go, but true to its chapter title, there was ultimately no shelter to be found here. Once the orphans within had grown old enough, they were shipped off to the war effort, unceremoniously loaded onto military trucks and never seen again. The convoy setting up out front of the orphanage is a chilling implication of this arrangement, and the crates left behind as payment are in all likelihood filled with food, perhaps the very same canned rations we can find in just about every cabinet. With all of that as context, it's plain to see the desperate situation these friends found themselves in. They were growing up, quickly approaching that age cutoff and all too aware that it meant their separation and almost certain deaths. If any still held hopes for a better future, they were fading fast. The very first chapter of Reanimal is titled Dead in the Water, and while this very aptly describes what we witness in the opening scene, its meaning runs a bit deeper. As an idiom, the phrase dead in the water refers to something that is doomed, destined for certain failure or ruin. It means no prospects, no future, and just as this describes the siblings' predicament at the start of the game, there is surely no better way to describe the sad state of these orphans at the beginning of the story. If they were to have any chance of survival and of staying together, then something had to change. Something big, and so great was their desperation that they committed to bring about this change no matter the cost. Well, 4 of them, at least. From the very outset, the sacrificial rite is shrouded in mystery. What was its origin? Where did these kids learn how to perform it? Both are questions we'll probably never get answers to, but regardless, we know that somehow they discovered this profane knowledge and put it to use, planning not just 1, but 3 separate sacrifices, a detail I think to be quite important. First, Hood, Bandage, Bucket, and the boy all cut their palms and drip their blood into a strange wooden object until it overflows, dark rivulets pouring over the sides and onto a shirt resting beneath it. Second, they kill a white rabbit in the outdoor shed within a ceremonial chalk circle composed of 5 more rabbits. And third, they ambush the girl, drag her out to the well, and kill her, throwing her body into the mud at the bottom while a flock of disturbingly anthropomorphic sheep bear witness. A blood sacrifice, an animal sacrifice, and a human sacrifice, each performed in a different location at a different time. And again, we have to ask, why? Well, as the saying goes, the devil is in the details, so let's dig a little deeper, starting with that first one. For starters, what exactly is the wooden object used as a vessel for the orphan's blood? At first glance, it seems to resemble an oddly shaped finger, but this is because we're looking at it upside down. In a secret room adjacent to the orphanage clock tower, we find the object in its proper orientation and can clearly see that it is, in fact, a doll. The entire room has been converted into a shrine and is filled with a large number of wooden dolls, all vaguely feminine in appearance, but this doll at the center is unique in that it is hollow, and that hollow space is located exactly where the womb would be. At first, this obscure reference to motherhood may seem to come out of nowhere, but it starts to make more sense when we consider the orphanage as a whole. The monster of this place is easily one of Reanimal's most memorable. Unlike all of the others, it is neither human nor animal, but something else entirely, a giant furry mass with segmented legs, human hands, and, most notably, a large black hole where the head should be. It is strong, fast, and relentless, both horrifying and fascinating in equal measure, and is known by only one name: the Mother. At first, I was pretty confused by this detail. How on earth is this thing a mother? Until I realized the subversion at play. This creature doesn't represent any particular mother, or any mother at all, really. Instead, it is the embodiment of a mother's absence, a bottomless void that can never be filled. And what is the one thing we see it do? Produce more occupants for the orphanage, the ashen-faced spider kids. As war swept across the land, bringing death and destruction in its wake, the loss of mothers and fathers produced a steady stream of homeless children to fill the orphanage, and the numbing weight of that loss has manifested here in hell as a great demon, forever haunting the building's crumbling halls. Keeping all that in mind, let's move on to the second sacrifice, the killing of the white rabbit. As I'm sure you can imagine, rabbits and hares carry a lot of symbolism spanning diverse cultures and periods of time, and while much of it applies in this context, innocence, vulnerability, liminality, and so on, there's one particular connection that I want to draw attention to, not with the slain rabbit itself, but rather with the chalk circle drawn on the floor. In medieval iconography, there's a symbol known as the three hares or the three rabbits, which depicts three of the animals chasing one another in an eternal circle. So closely, in fact, that they share the same three ears. Though its origin and original meaning are unknown, the symbol was eventually adopted by the Christian Church in Western Europe and was understood to represent one of two things, or perhaps both: the Holy Trinity, as the three shared ears form a triangle, or the Virgin Mary, since at the time it was believed that hares were hermaphroditic, meaning that they could reproduce without losing their virginity. You can probably see where this is going. Just as the loss of their mothers had landed this group of orphans in their hopeless situation, a new mother was going to be their ticket out, a mother of their own making. This is the underlying purpose behind the whole ritual, and why the first two sacrifices don't accomplish all that much on their own. Both function merely as preparation for the third, which completes them. Three separate sacrifices as part of one greater sacrifice, just as the Holy Trinity is three but also one. And so, after completing the second sacrifice, Hood, Bandage, Bucket, and the boy left behind the dead rabbit. Their plan was to use it as bait, drawing the girl into the shed where she could be easily ambushed, and this worked out perfectly. Moving within the shadows, they knocked her out cold, binding her with ropes and dragging her out into a sprawling field of yellow rapeseed flowers until finally reaching the dark, empty well. Her selection as the third sacrifice was not arbitrary. As far as we know, she was a virgin, her innocence represented by her clean, simple white dress, and that made her the only real candidate, the only one pure enough to become the mother of their salvation. For that was her purpose, to become a vessel, to carry and conceive the one that would save them all, a lamb. This was the orphans' way of fighting back against a world that had so utterly betrayed and discarded them, and for that reason, I don't think it's a coincidence that we find the fifth and final coffin for the rabbit in an underground bunker filled with absurdly massive artillery shells. The rabbit, the girl, both were being used to channel arcane power from the other side, their deaths constituting the greatest weapon that the orphans could possibly wield. and also, as it turned out, their greatest mistake. As we all know, things did not quite go as planned for the 4 orphans. They were messing with forces far beyond their understanding, and the consequences were nothing short of catastrophic. By completing their unholy ritual, the children unwittingly unleashed a terrible flood, pouring out from the well like blood from an open wound and drowning much of the land. Just like the great flood described in the book of Genesis, sent by God to cover the whole earth and purge its wickedness, these dark waters burst forth as if to cover the awful sin they had committed. Of course, we don't know for sure what powers are at play here, but the idea that the orphans were responsible for divine punishment is consistent with what we see in the cinema film. Interposed between shots of death, sacrifice, and decay are the eyes of a rabbit, rolling up in its head and being devoured by maggots. Like rabbits, eyes carry a great deal of symbolism, and while the specifics vary quite a bit between cultures, one meaning has persisted over millennia: the omniscience of deity. From the watchful, protective eye of the Egyptian god Horus to the all-seeing eye of providence dating back to the Renaissance, the eye has long been a sign that some greater power is watching over the world and those living upon it, which means that the emphasis here on eyes turning away and being devoured is a dark omen indeed. Not only did the ritual sacrifice not work in the sense that it granted the orphans no protection whatsoever, but it may also have plunged the world into an unprecedented darkness upon which no divine eye could bear to look. All around them, the war continued, oblivious to the rising tides, and through reanimation became eternal. Undead soldiers perpetuating a war now truly devoid of meaning, trapped in a cycle of annihilation that would in time claim each of the 4 remaining orphans, just as they had feared. Hood is shot, seemingly executed by a firing squad. Bandage trips a mine and is killed by the blast. Bucket is pushed off a cliff, and the boy is hanged. Based on the fact that his coffin is found in a prison, it seems that he may have been either a traitor or a prisoner of war. These diverse manners of death raise many questions, and perhaps the most relevant is that pertaining to time. How much time passed between the ritual sacrifice and the deaths of those involved? Did all die in their youth, or is it possible that some or all grew into adults? At any rate, I don't think that their deaths came as a direct result of the sacrifice necessarily. This was simply the inevitable coming to pass. But whatever the case may be, in this broken, transformed world, a wasteland of war and water, nothing ever stays dead. Whether in bodies of flesh or merely as souls, their anima, the children return in a twisted sort of resurrection, each trapped in a different region of the island where they are tormented by their own personal childhood trauma. Hood, taken advantage of by a child predator. Bandage, left behind at a hotel in what was likely an abandonment. Bucket, bullied to no end by other children at the orphanage, and the boy, lost at sea in a small wooden boat. It is unclear to me whether or not this reflects his own trauma or is simply the mechanism by which the story begins, for this is how he comes to find his sister, face down in the water and circled by seagulls, carrion birds, at least when the opportunity arises. He pulls her into the boat, and after a long moment, she awakens, gasping for air before suddenly and ferociously attacking him, her cold, wet hands grasping for his throat. But the effort is short-lived. He kicks her back against the side of the boat, and she calms immediately, perhaps snapping out of the frenzy of terror and adrenaline that defined her last waking moments. Things are, clearly, quite different now, and with hazy, clouded memories, the two begin to seek out and rescue their friends, hoping that against all odds they might find a way to escape. But unfortunately, that's not how hell works. As they traverse the island, evading its many dangers and gradually reuniting with each of their friends, the forgotten lamb inside the girl begins to stir, growing and contorting in sickening ways, until finally climbing its way up her throat. And just as the mother of the orphanage vomits out the spider kids, the girl gives birth to the sheep in a very unorthodox way, expelling it from her mouth in a large puddle of blood. Curiously, after this point the girl's dress becomes progressively more blood-stained until by chapter 9 it is bright scarlet, soaked all the way through. There could be any number of reasons for this, but one possibility is that it represents her loss of innocence as she progressively takes matters into her own hands, losing herself to the violence of war, firing rocket launchers, throwing grenades, and piloting an armored tank. Or perhaps it is simply a sign that she is getting ever closer to the truth of how it all began, with her own death. Regardless, let's turn our attention to the sheep beast. When it first emerges from the well that is the girl's body, it is about the size of a normal sheep, but that doesn't last very long. The animal wants only one thing: to devour anything and everything, but above all the ones who made it, and as each of the orphans are caught and consumed, it rapidly grows into a nightmare. This was inevitable. Remember, the orphans' combined blood became the sheep, so the reason why it pursues them with such relentless ferocity is simple: to become whole. They sought for a savior, yet in the end, these orphans actually delivered the Antichrist, the great beast of the apocalypse as described in the book of Revelation. Well, sort of. Revelation chapter 13 actually describes two different beasts, the Antichrist and the false prophet, and the sheep beast appears to be a combination of both figures. The first of these emerges from the deep sea, a twisted amalgamation of different animals fused together, and after suffering a mortal wound to the head, is miraculously healed and given power to overcome all people and all nations. As for the second beast, it comes not from the sea but out of the depths of the earth, sporting two horns like a lamb and bringing a special mark that its followers must wear on their foreheads, the mark of the beast. The symbolism here is pretty overt, to be sure, but I want to be clear that I don't think this is the full explanation. This is just one layer of the mystery that is the sheep beast, and I suspect there's going to be a wide spread of theories regarding what else it may represent. Personally, though, I don't think the sheep beast is part of the girl. It never belonged inside her, its conception was devised without her knowledge, and though it certainly benefited from her efforts to bring each one of her friends to the city, I don't think their demise was her intent. I believe that she really did wish to escape with them despite what they had done to her. But good intentions weren't nearly enough to save them, or herself. After consuming Hood, Bandage, Bucket, and the boy, swelling to the size of a building, the sheep beast finally goes after the girl, swallowing her whole. And as she tumbles into its gullet, a flashback plays in black and white. That scene from the orphanage I discussed earlier, depicting the first sacrifice. Only afterwards does she regain her senses, lost in the crimson belly of the beast, desperately searching for a way out. As an aside, it is unclear how time and space work in this place, if they work at all, but it is at least hinted that the beast eventually devours the entire island. Among the many objects embedded in the fleshy walls around us, we can find a diving cage like the one from Chapter 6, which was some distance from the war-torn city. Anyways, she presses on, calling out for her friends, and eventually stumbles into a sort of interactive flashback. She follows them into the shed to find the dead rabbit, and is once again knocked out, tied up, and taken back to the well, exactly how it all began. She regurgitates the sheep beast only to be swallowed by it, over and over and over again, an endless cycle of consumption. Or is it? At the top of the video, I said that Reanimal begins and ends with a sacrifice, which is true, but that doesn't mean it was the same one, necessarily. This long descending shot into the well appears twice, and while both instances are almost identical, there is one key difference. In the first, the four faces looking down into the well are joined by a fifth, one wearing a very familiar rabbit mask. Further complicating matters is the secret ending, which is perhaps better described as the complete ending. If you manage to find and open all 5 coffins in a single playthrough, a new scene is added between the girl's reanimation and the well overflowing with water that carries significant ramifications. As she lies motionless at the bottom of the well, 6 humanoid creatures emerge from the mud, each wearing a white animal mask. Uttering soft clicking noises, they slowly approach the girl and gently place their hands upon her as the well begins to fill with water. It's a very strange scene, but one way to interpret it is that there have been 6 other sacrifices made in the well. 6 children and 6 animals, a different one each time. It's a little tricky to tell what each of the masks are, but I'm fairly confident that we're seeing an owl, a horse, a fox, a rabbit, and a wolf or a dog, with the 6th being impossible to make out. A pig, perhaps? You'll notice that most of these correspond at least generally to animals encountered during the game, with the only exception being the dog. And from the art book, we learned that an area with dogs was being considered at some point during development. So what are we to make of all this? Well, if 6 sacrifices had already been made, and we just assumed that the orphans were somehow involved, which is, to be clear, a very big assumption, then it could be that the 5th figure who appears in the opening scene is actually the girl herself, looking down at the previous sacrifice with the others. But this explanation has a whole lot of problems. First off, it sure seems like the girl received her mask in the well from these mud creatures, not beforehand. Furthermore, if she was complicit in these other sacrifices, shouldn't she have been able to see what was coming, that the final sacrifice would have to be her? And for that matter, who even are all these sacrificial victims anyways? I think the answers to these questions depend pretty heavily on another, one that lies at the very heart of Reanimal. The story is clearly a cycle, but is it a progressive cycle with a definitive end, or is it a perfect loop? While I think you can make an argument for either side, I'm personally leaning more towards the latter. This broken island is confirmed to be some form of hell, after all, and I wouldn't be at all surprised to learn that the orphans are trapped in a loop of eternal torment. The fifth figure who looks down the well could be the girl's ghost, gazing down at her own body as one loop ends and another begins, and such an interpretation is further supported by the fact that there are far more than just 5 coffins. With the sole exception of the boy, who has only 1 coffin as far as I can tell, it is evident that all of the orphans have died multiple times, and possibly even in different ways or orders. In the current loop, the coffins for Bandage and Bucket are both marked with a 3, but none are marked with a 2. Hood's coffin is marked with a 1, but there is another coffin in the train car behind it that is also marked with a 3, and while coffin 5 contains the rabbit, others behind it contain human body bags. Are all these extra coffins simply remnants of previous loops, with the disparity in their numbers suggesting that some orphans die more frequently than others? What connection, if any, do they have with the mud creatures? Is it possible that they represent the orphans themselves, each of them having been sacrificed by the others in at least one iteration? To be honest, I have no idea, but fortunately we've got our handy book of Revelation here to give us a bit more context to work with. 7 sacrifices that culminate in world-ending calamity are, if not a perfect parallel with them, at least reminiscent of the 7 seals of God's heavenly scroll that unleash various judgments upon the earth in the last days. And just as the 7th seal is in turn heralded by the blaring of 7 trumpets, the final sacrifice of the girl might function as a microcosm for all 7 seals at once. Let me explain. The first 4 seals each release one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: conquest, war, famine, and death, which collectively herald the beginning of the end. Likewise, the blood sacrifice carried out within the walls of the orphanage was the work of 4 orphans. Except instead of seeking to perpetuate those 4 evils, they were instead trying to escape from them. Essentially, we're seeing a direct subversion of the seal's original forms, and that holds true for the remainder as well. The 5th seal is characterized by the voices of martyrs crying out from the dust, seeking vindication for the deaths they suffered as a result of their righteous beliefs, and this applies to the second part of the ritual, the animal sacrifice. But instead of being killed for what it believed, the rabbit was killed for its symbolism, essentially what it meant in the beliefs of others. The 6th seal unleashes a series of divine cosmic disturbances like the sun turning black, the moon turning red, and the stars falling from their place in the heavens, so it should come as no surprise that, for the island, these disturbances come from below, when the floodwaters emerge from the well following the girl's death and reanimation. That brings us finally to the 7th seal, the coming of the Lamb of God. This one is unmistakable. Instead of descending from heaven to reign over the earth with light and truth, the sheep beast claws its way out of the darkness to devour it entirely, only for a new world to take shape in its belly. 7 seals forever repeating, a cycle of eternal consumption and regurgitation. 4 orphans caught in free fall, spiraling deeper and deeper into an infinite abyss. And 1 white rabbit that holds the key to maybe, just maybe, finding a way out. And with that, we come to the end of this theory, my best attempt at explaining the mysterious sacrifice at the center of Reanimal's story. At least for now. Though I do feel quite confident about some of my interpretations here, I'm probably wildly off the mark with others and will be very interested to see what you all think, so be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, then I would hugely appreciate it if you would drop it a like, share it with anyone you know who might be interested, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more theories like this, since I have plenty more on the way. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.